Welcome to the 61st meeting of the Civil Rights Council. This meeting is called to order. Adley Sadler, Senior Counsel, will conduct the roll call.
Chair Garcia,
Present.
Director Kish,
Present.
Councilmember Cameron Banks,
Present.
Councilmember Chan,
Present.
Councilmember Glader,
Present.
Councilmember Han.
Present.
Thank you. I would like to thank the stakeholders for attending the Civil Rights Council meeting. This meeting is being webcast live via Zoom video conference, and the video of this meeting will also be available afterwards on the Civil Rights Council's website at https://calcivilrights.ca.gov/civilrightscouncil/ and the Civil Rights Department's YouTube channel. Please subscribe. We also have closed captioning available for participants, which you can find at the bottom of the Zoom bar features. If you're having difficulty accessing closed caption, you can send an email to the administrator to resolve the issue at council@civilrights.ca.gov. Members of the public joining remotely may have noticed that you're currently muted and your video is disabled at this time. Please note that the Q&A and chat functions are also disabled. However, please be advised that there will be opportunities for public comment and participation throughout today's meeting. At the end of each agenda item, we will ask if there are any public comments. In the interest of time, we will limit comments to 3 minutes each. We also ask the comments address a specific agenda item. If your comment does not address specific agenda items, we request that you share your comments at the end of the meeting. We have a number of ways for you to provide input and comments. First, you can email the council at council@calcivilrights.ca.gov. We will be checking this email account throughout the meeting today, and your comments will be read aloud or summarized and considered by the council members. Second, if you would like to speak directly rather than through email, click raised hand in Zoom or press *9 if you have called in. If you would like to rename yourself in the Zoom list of participants, you can find yourself on the list and click rename and the list of options next to your name. We would also like to acknowledge Civil Rights Department staff members joining us today. Rachel Laxton, Assistant Chief Counsel of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs, and Marielle Block, Suj Lee, Adley Sadler, Senior Counsels. As well as I would like to thank everyone who was attending here. We look forward to your participation throughout today's meeting. Next agenda item is review of the agenda. The agenda and the meeting materials can be accessed at the council's website at www.calcivilrights.ca.gov/civilrightscouncil/. The agenda includes approval of the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on March 21st, 2025, introduction of new council member Indira Cameron Banks, council member reports, the public hearing for the proposed modification to contractor non-discrimination and compliance regulations, the discussion of priorities and strategic planning, proposed non-substantive modifications to Civil Rights Council conflict of interest code, and subcommittee updates and discussion of additional subcommittee assignments. Moving on to the next agenda item, approval of the minutes. That's the first order of business. And the minutes are from our meeting, March 21st, 2025. And that again can be found in attachment A. I'll ask if we have any council member comments or edits regarding the minutes from our last meeting.
I think just a typo that Denny wasn't there. Wasn't he absent or was he there?
I wasn't at the February.
Oh, but you were at the March meeting. Okay, sorry, my bad.
Okay.
Staff located just one typographical error in item number course, now I lost it. Item number 7, section C, action by council. It refers to a final and modified text. It should be final unmodified, so we will correct that and post the correction.
And
With those, yeah, I'm sorry.
sorry, the same change needs to be made under A of item 7, changing final and modified to final unmodified.
It says on, it says on. It's, text.
Okay. With those, are there any further council member comments at this time? On this, ask if there are any public comments regarding the minutes. Any public comments? Seeing none. Do we have any remote public comments?
No, there's no public comment.
Seeing none at this time. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes as modified today?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Councilmember Cameron Banks,
Abstain?
Councilmember Chan.
Aye.
Councilmember Hong,
Aye.
Councilmember Glader.
Aye. The minutes are approved. We'll move on then to our next agenda item. The introduction of the new council member, Indira Cameron Banks. I will turn that item over to Director Kevin Kish.
Thank you. Before introducing our new council member, historically during the welcome, if there are people present in the audience, sometimes we invite them to identify themselves if they choose to do so. We do have a member of the public in the room today, so I would like to invite him, if he would like to come forward and introduce himself.
What do I speak into?
We can hear you from there.
Yes, Dr. Cliff Chang from the Bard Center for the Study of Hate at Bard College, former member of the defunct Fair Employment and Housing Commission's Advisory Committee.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. We're glad that you are here today with us. So turning to the introduction, I am very pleased that Governor Newsom appointed a new council member to join this group, Indira Cameron Banks, who is a founding partner of Cameron Banks Law and was previously with the Inner City Law Center as director at the Lawyers Preventing and Ending Homelessness Project, served with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District for many years, including as chief of financial litigation section. And she is a member of the Social and Economic Policy Advisory Board at the RAND Corporation. Councilmember Cameron Banks, we're very delighted to have you here. I didn't ask you to do this, but if you would like to say a few words, feel free to do so.
Really happy to be here working with you guys and working on the stuff that you're doing.
Thanks.
Welcome. Thank you, Director Kish. We'll now move on to our next agenda item. The council member reports. Do we have any reports from the council members at this time? Seeing none. No public comments on this, I assume, correct? Okay.
No.
Then in that case, then we'll move on to the next agenda item. Which is the agenda 7 is a public hearing for the proposed modification to contractor non-discrimination and compliance regulations. I would like to welcome everyone again today and note that the time is approximately 10:10 a.m. regarding this initial hearing. The purpose of this hearing is to receive public comments regarding proposed regulations implementing Government Code Section 12990 of the Fair Employment and Housing Act, otherwise known as FEHA, which impose anti-discrimination obligations on state contractors and subcontractors. The proposed modifications also implement the employment provisions of FEHA as well as the provisions of Article 9.5 of Chapter 1 of Division 3 of Title 2 of the Government Code, Section 11135 et sec. The proposed regulations modify Title 2, Division 4.1, Chapter 5, subchapters 1, 5, and 9 of the California Code of Regulations. Copies of the proposed modifications to contractor non-discrimination and compliance regulation text can be found in Attachment D of today's meeting materials. The notice of the proposed rulemaking and initial statement of reasons are available as attachments B and C respectively. The council has also posted the text of proposed regulations along with the supporting rulemaking papers on its webpage. We're holding this hearing as part of our formal rulemaking process. The hearing was noticed for the California Regulatory Notice Register on April 11th, 2025, emailed to more than 8,000 individual stakeholders that are part of the civil rights email list and published on its website. Pursuant to the notice, we are taking testimony on proposed regulations here today. We are accepting comments on the proposed regulations until 5 p.m. today, June 6, 2025. You may email written comments to the council at council@civilrights.ca.gov, COUNCIL at CALCIVILRIGHTS.ca.gov. You can also mail written comments care of Suge Lee, Senior Legislative and Regulatory Counsel, California Civil Rights Department, 555 12th Street, Suite 2050, Oakland, California, 94607. Please remember the comments must be emailed, postmarked, or hand-delivered by 5 p.m. today. Anyone who testifies here today or submits written comments will receive a copy of any changes or amendments that are made by the council, as well as anyone else who requests a copy. If there are further changes made by the council to the proposed regulations after today, the public will have a 15-day period within which to make written comments regarding those changes. We will consider each comment made today, as well as all written comments received or postmarked by today's deadline. The council will respond to each of the comments in its final statements of reasons, which will become part of the council's rulemaking process record. The hearing is being recorded today and will be transcribed. The transcription, as well as all written comments received, will be part of the official rulemaking record. Because the hearing is being recorded, it is critical that anyone speaking does so clearly and that only one person speaks at a time. To begin, I will turn this item to Suge Lee and Civil Rights Department staff to briefly summarize the purpose and substance of these proposed modifications.
Thank you, Chair Garcia. The Fair Employment and Housing Act prohibits discrimination by California employers. FEHA also requires state contractors and subcontractors comply with FEHA and to include in their contracts a non-discrimination clause. Article 9.5, also known as Government Code Section 11135, prohibits discrimination in programs, services, or activities conducted by or funded by the state, and authorizes the state to revoke state funding to contractors for unlawful discrimination. The Contractor Non-Discrimination and Compliance Subcommittee proposes modifications to the regulations implementing the state contractor provisions of FEHA. These regulations establish standard non-discrimination clauses for state contracts that satisfy both the Fair Employment and Housing Act as well as Article 9.5 of the Government Code. As background, Senate Bill 150 was signed into law in 2023. SB 150 required the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, Government Operations Agency, and the Transportation Agency to recommend enhancements to workforce development and community benefits related to public works that received federal funding under certain programs. SB 150 required these agencies to gather input on these recommendations from stakeholders, including the Civil Rights Department and other state agencies. In April 2024, these agencies presented a report to the governor and the legislature. The SB 150 recommendations included proposed updates to the state's non-discrimination clause to be used as a general term and condition in all state contracts. We would encourage anyone who would like more information regarding the SB 150 report findings and recommendations to check out the report. A link is included in the initial statement of reasons. We would also like to express our appreciation for the labor and workforce development, the government operations, and the transportation agencies, as well as all stakeholders who participated in the SB 150 work group for developing and providing these recommendations. The council reviewed and considered the recommendations in proposing these modifications to the regulation. The council proposes amending Government Code Section 11105 regarding the non-discrimination clause to clarify the obligations of state contractors and subcontractors under FEHA, as well as Article 9.5. These proposed modifications incorporate many of the recommendations from the SB 150 report. The council also proposes additional modifications to the regulations to strike citations to sections of Article 9.5 that have been repealed, specifically by Chapter 870 of the Statutes of 2016, SB 1442, and Chapter 199 of the Statutes of 2023, SB 447.
Thank you. Do council members have any comments on these regulations? Seeing none. Thank you, council members. We are now opening the floor for public comments. As a reminder, this hearing will be recorded and transcribed, so please speak clearly. We request that you begin by stating and spelling your name and any affiliation you represent. Also, if you are commenting on a specific subsection, identify that subsection so we may refer to it while you are providing your input. Each public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. We will hear testimony until all of those wishing to testify today have had an opportunity to do so. We will begin with in-person comments. If you are able, please come forward to testify. Otherwise, please raise your hand and the microphone will be brought to you. Do we have any in-person comments on this topic? No. Okay. Then we are now moving on to comments over Zoom. If you are joining remotely today by Zoom, please raise your hand virtually and you'll be asked to unmute to provide your testimony. Are there any Zoom comments at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
L. Rose, MFA CTE.
Thank you. My comment is the following. My affiliations, I'm a professor and an engineer, formerly with Apple and a number of companies you're familiar with. My comment is the following. When you do not use Zoom properly, as is going on right now here, there is no way for members of the public to contribute here, since you are contrary to best practices for these types of meetings, whether it's private or public. You have completely disabled the chat so that whoever's running the show here cannot provide those email addresses you just provided to the public to use. Please use these platforms in accordance with best practices. That's why we have them. That's why we create them. That is why we teach them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments at this time from Zoom?
Samantha Spoon, please go ahead.
Hello?
Samantha Spoon, you're still on mute. Are you able to unmute?
Okay, is I muted?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. My name is Samantha. I'm here to address a crucial injustice affecting families across California with wrongful child removals, CPS misconduct, and the systematic violations of parental rights that devastate innocent families. Every day, CPS operates or separates children from their parents without due process, relying on unverified claims, misleading evidence, and fraudulent dependency petitions. Families are being destroyed, yet courts rubber stamp these removals without scrutiny. Some of the key issues are, children being removed without warrants, violating constitutional rights. Hospitals unlawfully release newborns to CPS without parental consent, breaking federal protections. Only 30% of families ever reunify with their children, meaning 70% of parents never get their children back. CPS caseworkers manipulate investigations to justify their removals, leaving parents powerless. Dependency courts rarely challenge CPS, and they prioritize adoption over reunification. These failures disproportionately harm vulnerable families, leaving them to fight a legal system designed to keep them from ever seeing their children again. We demand action, mandate strict oversight of CPS case handlings, require transparency in the dependency court decisions, investigate wrongful removals and fraudulent petitions. Ultimately, just protect parental rights through the legal reform. This is a human rights crisis, and we urge the Civil Rights Council to investigate, intervene, and protect the families from CPS abuse, because we can't afford to wait while lives are being destroyed. Thank you for your time and attention, but these families deserve justice, and they deserve justice now.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments via Zoom?
No more comments on Zoom.
No more comments on Zoom? Okay. What about any comments via email?
No comments via email.
Want to thank everybody here who participated. As a reminder, the members of the public have until 5 p.m. today to submit your written comments, as we discussed earlier during the public hearing. The hearing portion of today's meeting regarding these particular regulations is now adjourned at approximately 10:18 a.m.
11:22.
I'm sorry, 11:22 a.m. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next agenda item. Discussion of priorities and strategic planning. I would like to start this meeting by turning this agenda item over to Councilmember Glader.
Thank you, Chair Garcia. I asked that this item be added to the agenda in part because we've made progress on significant regulatory initiatives recently, and so this is an opportunity for us to think about how best to focus our resources and attention going forward, and in part because the larger political environment has changed in ways that put pressure on state civil rights protections. We also have one new member of the council who may have priorities to share and who may benefit from a discussion of those priorities. We've talked in the past about different approaches that we can take to our responsibilities. We are a regulatory body. We also have the ability to conduct informational hearings and outreach to the public. So I have a couple of questions that I hope we can perhaps consider as a group, with input, of course, from the staff at this stage. Have council members identified priorities that we should be pursuing, and realistically, what is our bandwidth to pursue these initiatives? Does staff have suggestions for areas to focus going forward, given what we are hearing from, what you are hearing from real Californians? In addition, and in light of the changes in federal civil rights enforcement priorities, where should we focus to best protect Californians, housing, employment, some other area? And again, realistically, what is the bandwidth to support any such new initiatives? So thank you in advance for your contributions to the discussion. I'm very curious to hear what others would say.
Thank you, Commissioner Glader. Are there any comments by any council members at this time?
I want to say thank you to Councilmember Glader for raising the issue. I want to be mindful that, you know, as volunteers, I think I want to be honest with myself in terms of my own capacity, but also understand that the staff are also extremely stretched thin. And so as we think about priorities, obviously we have the regulatory items that I think are priorities to ensure civil rights continue here in California. But at the same time, what else might we do to address some of the stark issues that are facing Californians today? So one, I would really love to hear from staff first, kind of what priorities you have to respond to and that are priorities first, and then maybe we could talk about what we could lead from a council perspective or working together. That would be my perspective first.
I agree that I would want to hear from staff about staff priorities and what staff is hearing. In particular, if through the various platforms that the Civil Rights Department runs, what are people calling about? And has any of that changed since political environments changed? And then to Helen's point about being volunteers, I think where I can find the most capacity is the extent to which the work here intersects with my day job. So really interested in thinking about the civil rights of older adults in California.
I've been giving this a lot of thought as well. And, you know, I work in the housing issue, with housing issues on a daily basis. And, you know, the intersection of housing and immigration seems to be, you know, like an issue that's very recently starting to come up quite a bit. You know, tenants being threatened with, you know, with, regarding their immigration status. So I just something to think about. But I definitely agree with the other council members. Love to hear what staff thinks and the capacity and so forth.
Well, unless anybody else wants to weigh in of the council members, I'm happy to respond to that as I can. So first and foremost, I think it's important to remember that substantive regulations that explain how to carry out the law are really essential, and they can only happen through you. So to the extent that I know that some of the work or a lot of the work focuses on regulations, I just want to kind of point that out and emphasize it, because especially given sort of what's happening in the federal government, it's important that we codify California, the rights that we provide in our state, and give people some direction. That said, I just a couple of thoughts. I know Councilmember Glader is going to speak about this in the subcommittee updates, but we are hearing from a lot of folks, including state funded and administered agencies, that are struggling to figure out exactly how to implement the relatively new regulations on Government Code 11135. We have a number of calls and a number of specific and general inquiries. And the way that we can respond to that is through providing guidance and making it public. Again, this is really important, especially in light of what's going on nationally, that we codify this, make it clear, really help individuals know their rights and obligations under these regulations. And so that's one area where, you know, developing guidance would be really helpful. And as I said, I know Councilmember Glader will speak in more detail about that later on today. As far as ideas, these are really just ideas, but we hopefully are the council's regulations on the use of algorithms or automated decision systems in employment will be approved, fingers crossed. We should know that this month. And I think those have been such important regulations. And we did, in order to make sure that we did a thorough job, and didn't bite off more than we could chew at the beginning, we did limit those regulations to the employment context. There's also a lot of issues, as many of you know, and maybe Chair Garcia really has found as well. There are a lot of discriminatory issues regarding the use of algorithms and ADS, automated decision systems, in housing. And so that's one area where we could look to additional regulations, sort of following the lead of, but situated and tailored for the housing environment. So, you know, we were thinking that might be a possible new regulatory subcommittee. Another idea as far as non-regulatory work might be an exploratory committee to sort of research what's happened to federal regulation of laws that are counterparts to our state laws. So as some of you may have seen, the federal government has removed a good deal of guidance, has changed other guidance relevant to the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and the ADA. There's just a number of things, even the algorithm work that we've done. There were regulations that we looked to that have that are not necessarily easily available now. So we would kind of suggest, but again, it's your decision, but that it might be a great idea to have the subcommittee or a subcommittee research sort of the state of things on the, as far as federal guidance is concerned, or, you know, with regulations that have been changed or repealed federally, and see if and where there is an opportunity for California to fill in those gaps based on our laws and protections, so that people are, you know, have guidance regarding what their rights as Californians are, sometimes in spite of the changed regulations and guidance of the federal government. So just setting out those ideas, and yeah, I'll turn it back to staff. Happy to answer any other questions.
I'd like to make one comment. I thought, and maybe this is more of a conversation for the subcommittee assignments, but we do have one existing subcommittee on leave. And I think we were thinking about reframing that subcommittee to address some of the protected leave and reasonable accommodation changes that have come through statutory change.
Yes, that's correct. And I know that was going to be raised as well by Councilmember Glader, but I do think it bears mentioning here. Previously, this committee focused on leave and initially associational accommodations. We have seen a need for implementing regulations for new, relatively new legislation that has put into place reproductive loss leave and bereavement leave. There's some a couple of provisions in California Family Rights Leave Act that we think you know, could be strengthened. And then and this is sort of part of the last issue I was talking about, but also looking at pregnancy-related disabilities and accommodations, as there were some really good federal regulations issued at the end of the Biden administration. And so I think, you know, protecting those in a state vehicle may be something to consider. So anyway, that is another idea. And we, really encourage consideration of that. And like I said, Councilmember Glader can speak in more detail about that either now if it makes sense or in the subcommittee updates agenda item.
It sounds like, Rachel, as usual, you are right, and I should address this at this point. This relates to section 11, the protections in 11135, updated and expansive regulations implementing sections 11125 through 11139.8 of the government code, which prohibit unlawful discrimination by entities that are funded or administered by the state, became operative in July 1st, 2024. And since then, the council and staff have heard, as Rachel alluded to, from a number of state-funded and state-administered entities with questions about how to comply with some of the new regulations. And formal publicly available guidance on the 11135 regulations is needed to respond to frequently asked questions about compliance. To address this need, we had discussed repurposing 11135 subcommittee to develop guidance targeted at these state-funded and state-administered entities. And the guidance would address, but would not necessarily be limited to, regulations regarding language access for individuals with limited English proficiency, as well as disability access and accommodations. Previously, this subcommittee was staffed by me and former council member Julie Walensky. I think it makes sense for me to maintain my seat there. And my understanding is that Councilmember Hong is at least open to filling the vacancy.
And before further discussion on that, I just wanted to correct a misstatement I made. Obviously, Councilmember Glader has the information on the 11135 proposal, not the leave and accommodation subcommittee shift. Sorry, I know that was my fault. I misspoke. But I have and can share more information about that if there are any questions, but I'll leave it to you all to take this where you'd like to.
And I think we can also pick this conversation up in the subcommittee meeting, subcommittee agenda item when we just get down to the specifics of who's going to do what. I wanted to add one other comment to this discussion, recognizing the time and resource limitations that we all have. This comes out of discussions that I've had with Councilmember Hong, but it also speaks to something that Councilmember Chan was talking about, which is what are we hearing at the department? Something that I'm hearing is a desire for clear voices on civil rights and civil liberties. This body does have a crucial and central and primary, in some ways, regulatory authority. It also has a very important public-facing authority and the authority to hold hearings on issues of concern to Californians in the civil rights context. So one of the things that I've been thinking about and would like to propose is, well, let me take a step back and say we at the department have been working very closely with community-based organizations across the state on a number of different initiatives over the past couple of years. One of the specific authorities that we have, though, is to work with local human relations commissions, local civil rights bodies. I was thinking that it could be of use for the council to use some of these contacts that we have made with these local bodies, talk to them about what they are hearing from their constituents, and perhaps organize a hearing later in the year that would be a public forum for these local entities and organizations to speak about what they are seeing and hearing and the needs that they're experiencing. That could be a useful exercise for the council, but also just a useful exercise for people who care about these issues overall. So that is something that I will throw into the mix as we discuss at the end of the meeting, the formation of new subcommittees.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
May I ask some questions as we move forward? So just kind of digging down a little bit in terms of capacity, when we talk about regulatory packages, I know what a huge lift it is for staff in order to research, also conduct the meetings with the council members. So realistically, how many regulatory priorities should we be planning for, understanding that we are also down one council member, I believe, two council members, and understanding that the staff also have many other responsibilities. So just so that we have a sense of, okay, if we're advancing 2 packages, or we're advancing 3 or 1, so that we can try prioritizing what really needs to be done.
I think that's a great question. Let me offer a thought on that and then turn it to staff if you have other thoughts. It is true that our dedicated staff does both work supporting the council and all of our legislative work, plus other tasks. In our handbook for council members, we set out an ideal expectation that each council member would work at any given time on at least one regulatory subcommittee and potentially one non-regulatory subcommittee. Councilmember Hung is exactly right that we are down 2 subcommittee members. We have 2 vacancies, 2 council members. So, you know, this is not a contractual obligation for people who are appointed to this body. And I think particularly in this moment, it's not something that I think we should spend too much time thinking, ensuring happens. But I would like for each of the council members, I mean, I think also as your role as public regulators, for each person to have at least, perhaps at this point, no more than one regulatory subcommittee. Now, for council members who have just come off of a regulatory subcommittee or who are on one right now, I wouldn't propose joining a new one unless it was something that you were very passionate about. So that's what I would look to. I mean, we've talked about exploratory subcommittees for a housing project, for a leave issue, and for exploring changes at the federal level that might impact state laws. Those are 3 potentially regulatory subcommittees. I would not propose starting any more. And in terms of the timeline, that really depends on what we find. And looking to our staff, I would not, for example, want to introduce any more than one rulemaking package at any meeting. I think we can probably manage slightly overlapping rulemaking packages, like as one comes to the end of the process, we could begin the process of starting a new one. But I think that certainly for subcommittees that we're starting today, we're not looking at starting any of those processes for some months at least. So right now we have one regulatory rulemaking package, substantive rulemaking package, which is the one that we held the public hearing on today, the contractor non-discrimination. And that is it. Is that correct, everyone?
Well, I was going to clarify a couple of things. We do have 2 subcommittees where I think the regulatory packages, they haven't been finalized or completed, but we have the automated decision system regulations that are currently with the Office of Administrative Law and should be approved shortly. And so there's probably not a lot left on that subcommittee's plate unless we just need to touch base about any changes that the office.
We're not expanding that subcommittee until the package is through and complete, right, approved or disapproved.
Right. And then I will mention, just as far as the contractor non-discrimination and compliance subcommittee, as we have not, and Suj, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not received any letters of comment. So it doesn't seem likely that there will be multiple 15-day comment opportunities, or there may not, I don't know, we haven't, this is more in the weeds question, but there may not even be any changes based on the fact that we did not receive any substantive comments related to the current draft. So I don't think there will be a lot for that committee to do. And so I just wanted to point that out as we're looking at new work and new committees. I had planned to during the subcommittee updates agenda item, sort of talk through what committees still exist and who is still on them and who might be interested in also, replacing former council members on certain subcommittees. So I'm happy to do that now, or to wait until the subcommittee.
That item and do it all now.
That makes sense. You might as
Yeah,
well.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think it's good to just combine this with item 10 on the agenda.
That'll be item 10. That's right. Do we need to have a motion, one more motion for that? To move this agenda item
Might as
up?
well. I mean, if you want to do that right quick.
Do we have a motion to move agenda item number 10 up to the agenda for discussion now?
Seconded.
Your second? Yes.
Motion by Councilmember Glader, seconded by Councilmember Chan.
Okay, do we need to roll call?
Yes. Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Councilmember Cameron Banks,
Aye.
Councilmember Chan,
Aye.
Councilmember Glader,
Aye.
Councilmember Hong.
Aye.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead and sort of go through the various existing subcommittees and sort of talk about their status and their current staffing and any recommendations or thoughts that the staff have on going forward on these various subcommittees. So first, as we mentioned, we have a existing subcommittee on Government Code 11135 guidance. And there's a proposal, and I might go ahead and turn it over to Councilmember Glader if you have any further statement to make regarding this potential sort of new sort of repurposing of that committee to address questions and provide guidance for state administrated and or funded entities. So so that we can be sure that they're able and do abide by 11135 and its new-ish implementing regulations. So I didn't know if Councilmember Glader had anything additionally that he wanted to mention about that transition.
No, I gave my spiel. I think it turns on Councilmember Hong's willingness to join the endeavor. I don't know what process we have to follow to.
I think Rachel and team can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think probably we'll discuss the subcommittees, establish as we go through whether we want to form them and who will serve on them, and then take an omnibus vote at the end. So for record keeping purposes, right now we've discussed the 11135. What do we propose to call the subcommittee? Guidance?
Yeah, we say some regulatory guidance or whatever the term of art is.
Let's say 11135 guidance
Okay.
subcommittee, and the proposal is for council members Glader and Hong to serve.
Any thoughts or discussion from council members on that, or can we move on to the next?
Sorry, just to step back, is there any other legislative regulatory packages that we know that you have to move through? We have to move through based on legislative actions? I just want to, because right, if we need to hold a space for that, I want to recognize there's only so much that, even though it may not be a lot for the council members, I know all the same, everything else that's happening on the back end to make these packages happen is all on staff. So I want to just make space for that. So if we have to hold a couple, I also don't want to have to start one and then just be on one.
Yeah. I can kind of get to that and where we are, what our existing packages are. But I would say, staff has discussed this, and based on questions we received, we do feel like creating this guidance is significant and helpful, especially in the times that we are in. And so,
Not to discount this committee, I'm sorry, just overall in terms
Yeah.
of, hold the committee space for pending legislation that will require regulatory changes.
If I could say something, which is that obviously the council really, handles the substantive regulation. We do have some procedural regulation packages that we are currently working on. There's a conciliation, those regulations that are going through the OAL process, but not through the council. There was also a bill passed last year, SB 1340, which involves local enforcement of civil rights law through kind of county, city agencies. We have been tasked with writing the procedural regulations for those. And so those are both kind of the procedural regulations packages that we currently have either going or will have going soon.
So just to clarify for members of the public and the historical record, the council has statutory authority to interpret laws under the enforcement jurisdiction of the department, and the department has authority as delegated by the legislature and statute to do other regulations, including procedural regulations, and the example that Such just mentioned, to implement a new law permitting local enforcement of civil rights laws for the first time in 60 years in the state of California. So this is the same team that does that work as well. So I really appreciate you recognizing that. I think as we go through and form the subcommittees or propose the subcommittees, we can have a discussion at the end about whether there are any that should be put on hold, just for pure resources perspectives. But I think we should have the discussion of what they are first, so we can make that call.
For sure, definitely. Councilmember Hong, to your question, usually the practice, it's not a standard practice or policy, but what we found is that as far as any legislation pending right now, often at the CRD, we think it's good to wait and maybe give the legislation a year, see where questions and issues are coming up, and go forward with that information in drafting substantive regs. That's not always the case, but for instance, the reproductive loss leave and bereavement leave regulations, that legislation passed a couple of years ago. So we've had some time to see where there's issues or confusion and can use that. So the staff has not identified any please correct me if I'm wrong, team, but has not identified any currently pending legislation that we really need to do regs on this year. And then as far as past legislation, again, the bereavement and reproductive loss leaves are those that we're trying to implement this year, if there's a willingness to do that. Does that answer your question?
Time frame when there is legislation, how quickly the regulatory the regs have to go be implemented or to be proposed?
No.
Are we working against any kind of clock to be aware of?
Okay. No, it's fully at our discretion and your discretion as far as when and whether regulations are implemented. Because
just for the I'm sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No, I'm just going to say some legislation, we may determine that it's clear on its face, and so regulations wouldn't be that beneficial and are more needed on another more complex bill that has become law. So,
So just for historical context, now that all of a sudden it's been 4 years since I've been on this committee, and the council itself is a relatively new entity since what, 2013, I believe. And so I think this is kind of a work in progress in terms of what's been advanced. Specifically based on the expertise of the council members themselves in terms of what they are able to I think own and also support staff, or vice versa. And as we move forward with this discussion, I've always struggled with kind of like, what is the rubric in terms of priorities, right? In my mind, the way that I think about it personally is like, what do I feel like is going to impact most Californians now? Or like, what's the immediacy of impact? And obviously there are certain things that are political, some things that are going to also have a bigger impact, but I think that's a discussion I'd love to have when we talk about strategic planning, or what are the priorities in which we would recommend we spend our time on.
sure, and I can just respond briefly to that, and if other staff or council members have thoughts. So as far as immediacy, unfortunately, regulations are what they are, and they generally take a year from the date they're noticed to make their way through the system, and then even months after to actually become operative. That's unfortunately sort of the nature of the beast. However, one of the reasons that we have given some thought to this 11135 guidance is that guidance is not required to, we're not required to open it to public comment. There's not specific things we have to do to progress in each step. So it can be faster than regulations, and it can be available sooner to the public. And so that was our thought process to some extent, and a more immediate need that could be met perhaps more quickly than some regulatory packages. So I don't know if that speaks to your question or comment, but if not, let me know and I'll open it up to others.
No, I think it goes back to possibly understanding, because partly we wanted to have hearings that are related, that inform regulatory packages that would be necessary, or how to prioritize those. And so I think kind of going back to Jenny's questions about like, what are we hearing? What is the impact? What are the resources, or what needs to have additional clarity or for Californians would be helpful. That does answer it. I will just say that I'm interested. Well, let me stop, and then why don't we just go through the subcommittees?
Okay. So at the end, one of the proposals that the council will be voting on is changing the purpose, or sort of the product that we're looking for from the 11135 guidance subcommittee, and also filling former council member Walensky's position with council member Hong, if she's willing. So that is that regarding the Government Code 11135 guidance subcommittee. If there are any further comments on that, please feel free to go ahead with them. Otherwise, I'll go to the next subcommittee.
I'm happy to be on 11135.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hong. Okay, moving on, I want to, so currently there exist reasonable accommodations for associational disabilities and employment leaves. This subcommittee, we would suggest that it be renamed as the Subcommittee on Protected Employment Leave and Reasonable Accommodations. This is the committee that we would suggest working on the regulatory package that I spoke about, that deals with various new leave entitlements, pregnancy accommodations, and leaves and bonding leaves. This is a package that staff have done some preliminary drafting on. So it's not, and I believe, well, Councilmember Chan and former Councilmember Alude staffed this committee. So Councilmember Chan has reviewed, I believe, the bereavement leave and or the reproductive loss leave regs. So he's already familiar with those as they're currently drafted, but of course they're open for redrafting and revising. Our suggestion would be that our council member Cameron Banks join this subcommittee, and yeah, it would basically be a regulatory committee working on that particular package. Any comments or questions on that?
That makes sense for me.
I think one of the things that we can do in order to get to a clean vote at the end is ask like any discussion, any opposition, and seeing none, let's move to the next one.
The next one, so currently the Algorithms and Bias Subcommittee is composed of Councilmember Hong and Councilmember Glader. As I mentioned, the regulations that committee did a lot of work on are currently pending at the Office of Administrative Law. We would advise not disbanding that committee at this point, because within the next 2 weeks to a month, OAL may be coming to us suggesting changes that we would need to get subcommittee approval on. So that's pretty much what's left for that subcommittee. So we would maintain leaving it as is. And then ending it when the regs are hopefully approved. So fingers crossed on that. We also currently have the Unruh Civil Rights Act committee subcommittee, which is composed of Chair Garcia. This subcommittee, I believe, was sort of made inactive last year. We would propose, given the priorities and the other packages that we are working on, and may, if the council is willing, new packages that are coming up, we would propose disbanding the Unruh Civil Rights Act committee at this point, and maybe revisiting it in future years when there's more capacity to take on, those regulations. Any comments, questions, oppositions on that?
Seeing none.
So then the next, and this committee has had kind of a slightly, at least administratively, confusing history. So the Community Education and Outreach Committee. Technically, this committee was disbanded, I think, last year, and sort of morphed into a subcommittee that worked on last year's joint public hearing with the Commission on the State of Hate. It's still sometimes referred to in meetings as the Education and Outreach Committee, but of course that particular hearing is no more. So I don't know if Kevin mentioned the public informational hearing on involving local entities and their experience with enforcement of civil rights laws.
Rachel, can I stop you for 1 second?
Please.
Who was on the Community Education and Outreach Committee?
Yes,
Councilmember Hong and
Councilmember Hong and Councilmember Chan. Yes.
So I think probably what we would propose, if this is what you guys wanted to do, is to disband this subcommittee, form a new subcommittee that would basically be public civil rights hearing in the broadest possible way. And then I know Councilmember Hong has expressed interest in that. Councilmember Chan, if you want.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Okay. Does that work for you guys? Our team?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any, um,
So just to be clear, we're disbanding this subcommittee and creating a new one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we could call it disbanding and creating a new one or just renaming,
okay,
whatever we prefer.
okay. Yeah, I'll note that. And again, at the end of all of this, I will summarize all that we've talked about, for purposes of an omnibus vote.
We are getting on a lot here.
Yeah.
Which one do you want?
And then finally, I mentioned this briefly a moment ago, but the last committee that is still effective is the Contractor Non-Discrimination and Compliance Committee, staffed by Councilmember Hong and Councilmember Chan. Again, this should be a
All right,
pretty,
Councilmember Hong and Councilmember Garcia.
Yeah, I'm on that.
oh, I'm sorry, I had that written wrong. I don't know what. Apologies, Chair Garcia. Yeah, Councilmember Hong and Chair Garcia. Again, this committee, given that it's not, this regulatory package is not seeming super controversial, I don't imagine it will be a long and difficult and time-consuming process going forward. But again, we wouldn't want to disband it until we were through the regulatory process and, OAL has approved the regulations. So that's the long and the short of it. And then what we had talked about, which this is totally kind of up in the air. These were just our ideas. If the council was curious about thoughts and wanted to do more, again, the one idea was sort of doing some research and looking into creating regulations surrounding the issue of automated decision systems and automated decision systems and housing. And I don't know, and Director Kish, I don't know what your thoughts are. If this committee were to come into being, would it be exploratory for now, looking at a possible package, perhaps next year in the future? And that's a question for.
We would just create I don't see a point in creating a subcommittee that then has to be renamed.
Okay.
One of the things that we think about in creating subcommittees is the serial meeting rule. So when we create a subcommittee, that subcommittee needs to stay on to avoid a serial meeting. So I would just create a subcommittee about automated decision making systems and housing.
Okay.
If that is something the council wanted to do, I think this is a great idea and would be really helpful if there are council members other than Councilmember Hong who want to participate on it.
I'll participate on it.
Sorry, was that Chair Garcia?
Yeah. I'll be interested. And I'd also be interested in that one, having been exposed to the ADS regs round one.
Okay, so that subcommittee would be composed of Councilmember Glader and Chair Garcia, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I will put that up, include that in our vote.
And then, sorry, the final one that we had discussed is, I wouldn't call it exploratory just because everything is exploratory.
Yeah.
But a subcommittee to explore Rachel, how would you frame this?
Federal regulations.
Well, I won't say explore, but to research the fate of, it's not very good, but research the status of federal guidance and regulations on relating to the federal counterparts to the state laws that CRD enforces. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, Family Medical Leave Act, Pregnancy Worker Fairness Act, and Title VI, and you know, that whole list.
Why don't we call it a subcommittee to consider federal policy changes?
Yeah, that sounds much better. Is anyone interested in that committee or serving on it?
I would, this Councilmember Cameron Banks, I would be interested in serving on the board.
And I'm sorry, Kevin, I was taking too many. What was your suggestion again for the name?
Subcommittee to consider federal policy changes.
Okay.
Obviously, implicitly as they relate to state law and state protections, but we can just call it that. And then Councilmember Cameron Banks, is there anyone else who would like to serve on that? We are getting.
I'd be interested.
Okay.
Sorry, who said that?
Councilmember Chan.
Okay, thank you.
But you were gonna say we are getting, and then I cut you off.
I think that this is probably the max.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit more than the max, but we can go at our pace and do what we do.
Got it. That makes sense. Can I ask just a question about the subcommittee to consider federal policy changes? I wonder about the extent to which the agenda for that subcommittee may be shaped by the hearings that you would propose, Director Kish. And if so, then maybe it makes sense to kick the can on that one until after we get it. I don't know. I'm floating this as a question for the group.
So what I'm thinking, this is going to be driven by the council members, to some degree by the council members' capacity. I agree with you. So I think that one thing we can do is work with council members Hung and Chan on a public hearing. In the meantime, there are a number of changes that we know about that we could begin to compile into a document to see whether there are areas of California law that need clarification in light of those changes. So I think that the work can proceed, although I agree I wouldn't want to actually make any concrete proposals for potential regulatory action until a bit later.
In order just to dig in, because I know, you know, when we do a public hearing, it's like, what is the result, right? It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time. And last year we were kind of like, well, then what came out of this, right? So I just want to have us define that before we start, partly so that we're all on the same page of what the goal is, because I think this is going to take all of our respective connections to make successful.
Yeah.
But then also one thing that I'm committed to that I want to see happen personally, I think that we've all heard in many of these meetings is that most people don't know what this body does. Generally, people don't know where to go for help. Now that we know that so much federal funding is cut, those resources are even going to be less available. People don't know the difference between the federal or the state. I mean, like, again, we're a bunch of lawyers, but for the general public. So one of the things that I'm committed to doing is at least trying to create some kind of quick document about where people can go between basically what they think CRD does, which is not what they do generally, and where they would go, whether or not that's in their local area online, but like kind of helping them narrow down where they can get some help.
So like a frequently asked questions guidance.
It's gonna, what I'm thinking about is kind of like where you could start to get the resource that you need. And it's a little bit of a maze, right? Because how do you diagnose your issue, right? But at least getting them a little bit of the header start. for statewide resources that they already exist, and narrowing down with the public entities that may need to
Yeah.
step up or not.
You know, in my experience, I think there is a value in just hearing from people about what's going on in their lives and in their work. That is a little bit frustrating for me. I think like you, I like concrete results. So one of the ways that we can think about approaching and framing a public hearing involving local civil rights and human rights entities is to ask them what resources they are looking for in order to serve their communities and then help them. I mean, partly the hearing would itself compile these resources at a local level, and then we can help consolidate and perhaps produce a short document. And the first place to distribute it would be with the local entities and public entities that are coming to talk. So I think that is a good and feasible outcome, the practical outcome of this hearing, especially when we approach the planning of it with this light. Don't just come here and say all the things that you're worried about in the world. Come here and tell us what you need in order to provide services to your community.
I really appreciate that narrowing down. And then I'd also like to recommend if we could have a press release prepared to highlight what people are facing that may not, one, I think we are all assuming things, but what we might learn, at least to highlight what those issues are, so that it's an educational piece for hopefully the public.
Yeah, essentially a document that, I'm trying to think of the right word, that summarizes learnings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's feasible.
Yeah. And then also then maybe help inform the priorities in which we might take in the next year.
Yep.
That's how I would see it. I just want to make sure that we're bought into it before, because I will own, not own too much, but I will prioritize my time to support staff or lead that effort.
Okay.
Can I just clarify? I think, so Councilmember Hong, one purpose of the actual invitation to the groups to participate would be to summarize, this is what CRD enforces, this is what the council regulates in these areas, and that way it'll be that much more concrete and serves the informational purpose you're describing. Okay.
And to understand like what they have locally, and what they're saying. I mean, I think part of it is centralizing what those resources may be.
Although I like this in the sense that it's not just us extracting information, that we could actually provide some information to these folks about what it is that we do as well.
Yeah.
And so maybe we have a short presentation at the top, no more than 10 minutes. Yeah, good. Okay.
Okay,
Identified all the subcommittees now? Are we?
we have, are there any more council comments or public comments, I guess is the next step.
No, do we need to ask for public comments on this at this point?
Yes.
Are there any public comments regarding agenda items 8 and 10, right?
Yes, we have a comment from VF. VF, please unmute.
Okay,
Hello, can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Hello, thank you. As a representative of a large employer in Northern California, I'm eager for guidance and resources regarding reasonable accommodations for associational disabilities. I'm happy to hear that there is a refresh of this, of the subcommittees regarding this. This year, I contacted CRD, and the response when I was asking for guidance and clarification was to hire a lawyer. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Public comments at this time?
There are no more comments over Zoom.
Okay. Any comments by email?
Yes. We received one comment via email, which I will read aloud.
Okay,
FYI, I just came from your meeting and raised my hand to make a comment on a particular agenda item. I never got called on, and whoever it was chairing. The meeting just went on to the next item. My virtual hand had been up for at least 10 minutes, during which all of the members had been called upon to speak, and discussion ensued. At the end of the discussion, a vote was taken, but never was there the opportunity that is supposed to be provided to the public to comment. I have the script and know now this goes or is supposed to go. These meetings are public for a reason, and there is procedure for taking comments from the public on agenda items. Adhere to it.
thank you. Do we, somebody present
Yes.
that wants to make a comment?
Yes. Well,
Can you please state your name for
yes,
the record?
Dr. Cliff Chang from the Bard Center for the City of Haight at Bard College. I'd like to pick up some elements that were discussed maybe 20, 25 minutes ago. And this relates to the outreach committee. Wonderful idea to be clear and speak out. Strategy, very important at this point. The disconnect between what is going on federally and what we have done in California for decades in our democracy in California. This is very important. We are at a critical juncture in our country, in our democracy. Many people have a view that we've had democracy since 1776. I don't take that view. Democracy started with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act in the mid-60s. That's when we started to have democracy. The pushback has been very strong, and very fierce when Obama got elected. So what we're seeing is a pushback. This did not just happen. It is not because of the current occupant of the White House. It is not because of that. This person is merely an opportunist. This pushback has been happening for years. It's been planned for years. It's well funded. All these hits that are going on, particularly against trans people, the problems, targeting the school boards, libraries. This is all part of a large strategic plan. If we want to get civil rights back, we have to be strategic about this. I do not want to cast aspersions on doing the nitty-gritty work of writing regulation. That's great, very necessary, very necessary work. But also at the same time, you could be doing this, but keep in mind, 40% of Californians voted for fascism. They voted for fascism. Democracy is not safe in California. We have to work at this. And having public education is very important. So I would encourage you to do that. I understand about bandwidth and volunteering. I understand. I do very much understand that. I sympathize with that. I really do. So this is just, I'm just trying to speak to a broad perspective on things. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Really appreciate it. Okay, so
Chair Garcia,
yes,
sorry to interrupt. Before you move on, I want to note that I failed to mention the person who submitted the comment I read aloud. So I want to add that it was submitted by Lisa Rose, MFA. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that update of the record. Turning to Rachel Langston, you want to summarize for the record just all of the different assignments and how, so that we can just vote in one vote rather than each individual subcommittee assignment?
Yes. I will do that, please. I tried to catch it all, but please let me know if I.
I'm ready to go if you want me to.
So am I.
I think I took notes, but I can't read some of my writing.
I think I'm okay, and
Okay,
Kevin,
go.
you can put in if I miss anything.
Yeah, please proceed.
So the vote would be on doing, taking the following actions with certain subcommittees, and to create certain subcommittees. In specific, the vote would be to repurpose the Government Code 11135 Guidance Subcommittee to create guidance on compliance by state-administered and state-funded agencies. This subcommittee would be staffed, continuing to be staffed by Councilmember Glader, and Councilmember Walensky's vacancy would be filled by Councilmember Hong. Next, there's a proposal to rename the Reasonable Accommodations for Associational Disabilities and Employment Leaves Committee, and rename that to the subcommittee on protected employment leaves and reasonable accommodations. And that committee would be staffed by Councilmember Chan and Councilmember Cameron Banks. There's also a proposal to rename the Community Education and Outreach Committee, also known as the Subcommittee for the Joint Hearing with the Commission on the State of Hate, and rename that to the Public Hearing Committee. And that committee would be, the members in that committee would be Councilmember Hong and Councilmember Chan. The existing algorithm and bias subcommittee will stay as is and continue until the Office of Administrative Law finalizes its review of the regulations, and those are hopefully approved. There is a proposal for a new committee. Well, sorry, before I get to there. Similarly, the Contractor Non-Discrimination and Compliance Committee, currently staffed by Councilmember Hong and Councilmember Chan, would remain active throughout.
Garcia.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why I keep doing that.
It's okay.
Councilmember Hong and Councilmember Garcia, they would continue to staff that throughout the duration of the rulemaking process. And then there has been a proposal for a new committee on automated decision-making systems and housing. And that committee would be staffed by Councilmember Glader and Chair Garcia. I'm making sure I didn't miss anything. Kevin, did you have anything on your list that I?
One further item is the vote would disband the inactive UNRU subcommittee. And then finally, the vote would establish a new subcommittee to consider federal policy changes to be staffed by council members Cameron Banks and Chan.
That's what I have. I think we got everything. So do I hear a motion to approve all these either new subcommittees, disbanding subcommittees, or remaining consistent with, how would I rephrase
Just
this?
do it.
All in favor of taking the steps just described?
Yeah.
All in favor of taking described the racial language just described. Do I hear a motion for that? So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Take a vote.
Chair Garcia,
Aye.
Councilmember Cameron Banks. Was that an aye? I didn't hear. Councilmember Cameron Banks.
Yes, aye.
Okay. Councilmember Chan.
Aye.
Councilmember Glader.
Aye.
Councilmember Hong.
Aye.
The motion passes. Congratulations. So let me see, where are we now? We are in, I think item 9 of the agenda. Yeah. So the next item on the agenda is proposed non-substantive modifications to civil rights conflicts of interest code. I'll turn this over to Ellie Sadler, the Civil Rights Department staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair Garcia. I will provide background and explain the department's recommendation to the council regarding the proposed non-substantive modifications to the Civil Rights Council's Conflict of Interest Code. First, I'd like to note that the Civil Rights Department's current Conflict of Interest Code is included with the materials for today's meeting as Attachment E. The council's current Conflict of Interest Code is included as Attachment F. As background, the Political Reform Act prohibits a public official from using their official position to influence a governmental decision in which they have a financial interest. The Political Reform Act requires all state and local agencies to adopt and update a conflict of interest code that identifies all officials and employees within the agency who make governmental decisions based on the positions they hold. The individuals in the designated positions must disclose their financial interests as specified in the agency's conflict of interest code. And to help identify potential conflicts of interest, the law requires public officials and employees in designated positions in a conflict of interest code to report their financial interests on a form called Statement of Economic Interest, also known as a Form 700. The purpose of the Conflict of Interest Code and the Form 700 are to ensure that officials are acting in the public's best interest and not in their own. In 2024, the Civil Rights Department, pursuant to Government Code Section 87306, amended its Conflict of Interest Code. The department publicly noticed the proposed modifications and reviewed comments received during the public comment periods. As part of updating the department's Conflict of Interest Code, the department added the members of the Civil Rights Council to the department's code. The department made this change for greater clarity and to reflect the organizational structure that the council is part of the Civil Rights Department. As part of adding the council members to the department's Conflict of Interest Code, the department maintained the disclosure requirements for council members that are in the council's separate Conflict of Interest Code. As part of this addition, the department updated the required method for council members to file their statement of economic interest. The council's Conflict of Interest Code requires members to file their statements with the department, which then makes a copy and provides the original statement to the Fair Political Practices Commission. The department's modified code requires council members to file statements electronically directly with the Fair Political Practices Commission, which can be done through the Fair Political Practices Commission's website. Finally, as part of adding the council members to the department's Conflict of Interest Code, the department also maintained the authority for the chair of the Civil Rights Council to determine the disclosure requirements of any Civil Rights Council consultant. The department's Conflict of Interest Code was approved by the Fair Political Practices Commission on October 22nd, 2024, and became effective December 12th, 2024. Because the council members are now included in the department's Conflict of Interest Code, it is duplicative and confusing to maintain a separate Conflict of Interest Code for the council. The process to repeal the council's Conflict of Interest Code is called a file and print regulatory action that does not require public comment. The department recommends that the council vote to repeal the council's separate conflict of interest code located in section 11005 of Title II of the California Code of Regulations and authorize the department to complete the rulemaking tasks necessary to repeal the code.
Thank you so much. Do we have any council member comments? None at this time. Do we have any public comment regarding the proposed non-substantive modifications to the Civil Rights Conflict of Interest Code? No comments in person, anything via Zoom or email?
None over Zoom.
And no email either?
Just a moment.
Was that a no?
Just a moment.
Okay.
No, there are no comments.
So, is there a motion? Do we need a motion here for
I move.
to repeal the Conflict of Interest Code 11005, the Code of Regulations?
Yes.
And is there a motion to repeal that provisional, that code?
So moved.
Or a second? Take a vote, please.
Kara Garcia,
Aye.
Councilmember Cameron Banks,
Aye.
Councilmember Chan,
Aye.
Councilmember Glader,
Aye.
Councilmember Hong.
Aye.
The motion passes. Do we need any other motions on this? I think that's it, right?
That's
that-
yes, that's enough.
Okay. Moving on to the next section of the agenda. Are there any public comments on items not on the agenda at this time? None in person? Anything on Zoom or email?
Nothing on Zoom.
Okay. And we will move on to the final agenda item, which is adjournment. This concludes our meeting. This meeting is adjourned at 12:38 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Great meeting.